Hey everyone, it's Tremia, and I'm going to start doing something new. About once a month, I'm going to try to interview others that have lupus or other forms of chronic illness. And today I have my very good friend Sarah with us.
Hello.
This is Sarah. And so I've got some questions. We'll just see how this goes. Okay, Sarah, when were you diagnosed with lupus?
It was really in my early 20s. I had gone in for a gynecological exam, and they came out and they told me I had syphilis. And I said, "Excuse me?" I said, "I don't think that's possible." And they said, "Well, you could have been born with it." And since I was adopted, I had no idea. But it is very common for ANAs, which are the big indicator for lupus, to create a false positive for syphilis.
Yes.
So, this was a nightmare for me because I had no idea how this could have possibly happened. And I'm like, was I, what was going on that I might have been born with this? So, later on, when I was in New York, I went to my gynecologist again, and I said, I seem to have 2 non-reactive dilutions for syphilis, and I, so know this. Don't,
Yeah.
just keep it down there. Well, about a month later, I got a call from the New York Department of Health on their list of having an STD, and I freaked out. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm on a list as like this
See what we
social
go through.
pariah. And it was horrible, and all I could think was like, oh my God, I'm labeled, this horrible thing, and from nothing that I did. And so I called up the insurance, the gynecologist, and I said, "Listen, I told you guys about this, and this is like totally wrong." So they said, "All right, let's let us fix this." And then they called back and said, "You need to go see a rheumatologist." I'm like, "What's a rheumatologist?" And I'm like looking it up in the dictionary, and I'm like, I still don't get it. So I made an appointment, and it started this long line of seeing different doctors and 95 different diagnoses and all kinds of 90, different things. Every doctor told me something different, including one doctor said, it's because you're overweight. And I was only about 165, maybe 65 pounds at the time.
I'd love to weigh 165 pounds.
Me too. And I had been going to doctors every once in a while because since, I guess, starting in the late 90s, because I was like so exhausted. I get so exhausted, and I just feel like I was always struggling to just, get through the day, and I was tired and whatnot. But finally, the first doctor says, "You have lupus." And I'm like, okay, didn't quite know what that meant.
What type of lupus did he say you have?
Systemic.
Okay. And you already said that you saw 95?
Well, no, I mean, that was a gross exaggeration. I think I saw 1, 2, 3. I've seen about 8 different doctors.
8 doctors before you were diagnosed?
No, each one had a different diagnosis.
Yeah, but not lupus.
Well, some were lupus, some said not lupus. And some says, something's like, oh, you've got fibromyalgia or chronic fatigue, or it's in your head, or you're overweight. Or, so I kept getting different diagnoses, or that you did non-differential autoimmune disease.
Okay. And you said your first symptoms were like debilitating fatigue?
Yeah, I would just get so exhausted and knocked out. And then early in 2000, I guess around 2001, because I was going to school full time, working full time, I got Epstein-Barr. And so that, so there was a period of time where I was just really exhausted and just kept pushing myself. But it wasn't till about 2003 or about 2004, I was scuba diving, and I managed to herniate the bottom, like I guess L4 and L5 of my lower back really badly, to where they caused severe pain down the back of my legs. And then, which really which began triggering a lupus flare.
Okay.
And it just kept getting worse.
Okay, in addition to having systemic lupus, what other illnesses and diseases do you have that fall under that umbrella?
Okay, the non-differentiating autoimmune.
Okay.
And I'm sorry because I'm really bad with names of these things. The connective tissue disorder.
Mixed connective tissue.
Yep. And Sjogren's.
Sjogren's.
Fibromyalgia, which I, also show signs for.
Mm-hmm.
I was told, by my pain doctor that I had hysteria.
Hysteria?
because I was not reacting well to the trigger point injections for the cortisone trigger point injections for the back pain. I also screwed up my neck and have a herniation and 2 bulges in my neck from skiing.
Yay. Do you have like Raynaud's?
No, not particularly.
Okay.
But let's see, this Sjogren's, I got the irritable bowel syndrome thing going on. And when I was on the prednisone, when I had the big doses and I gained 70 some odd pounds, first I gained it from the trigger injections from the cortisone, because I don't react well to any kind of steroid. It just doesn't do good things for my mind or my psyche, and it did not do anything positive, for my emotional well-being. It was not good, for me mentally.
Yeah, because I know steroids really can affect your attitude. From experience, I know that one.
And I had cushions when my face was so round that nobody recognized me, and all the weight I gained very quickly. Mm-hmm. And I had been in a relationship with a man for 3.5 years when I started getting really ill, and he could not hide the disgust at my weight gain, and just couldn't deal with my being ill and getting sicker. And because I used to be like a real gonzo adrenaline junkie, and took him hiking down deep in the Grand Canyon and backcountry camping and everything, and kept him alive when he nearly tripped off the mountain, and taught him how to bring enough water and survive out in the wilderness. And he just was so disgusted by my weight gain at that time, and I would run into people who hadn't seen me for years, and they'd be like, "Hi, how are you?"
Yeah, we were talking yesterday about, walking past buildings, past the windows, and you look, and there's a person walking past that window, and you don't even recognize yourself.
No.
And that's what was hard for me, not recognizing yourself.
Oh, to finish answering your question, I'm sorry. Mm-hmm. I have chronic pain combined with the lupus, the Sjogren's, and the fibromyalgia. So I'm just like, with all the herniations. So I'm like this, wonderful, this was more than a trifecta, but of issues that all seem to aggravate each other, because the fibromyalgia ups pain signals even more. And I've always had a very high tolerance for pain, but somehow the lower herniations in my back create this kind of nerve thing in the back of my legs that I can only describe. It either feels like when you hit your funny bone, that kind of, and I would get this in one or both legs, either or, every night. So every time I'd lie down at night, it would start, and it felt like the muscles were just seizing up, and I couldn't stretch it out. I couldn't do anything. And if I was stuck in a car or, anything, I would just, I could have climbed the walls with my fingernails. It would make me want to cry. It brought me to like screaming tears several times, and it was just the most horrendous nightmare. And that kind of constant chronic pain changes your brain chemistry. So your personality is changing at the same time your body is changing, and your face gets to where, like, I had a neighbor I lived above for 4 years, and I hadn't seen her in maybe 6 months or a year, and I ran into her at the super. I'm like, "Hi, how are you? Hi, Nancy, how are you doing?" She's like, "Do I know you?" And I'm like, "I used to live above you." And I walked out and I just burst into tears. It was just horrible. Because I didn't recognize I had like no mirrors in my house after a while, because I couldn't even recognize myself. And, now I'm 70 pounds lighter than I was, but I've got a picture with my friend Beth, and I keep it because I can't believe this could have happened to me, and how different it was. How I still don't recognize that person in that picture, but I do recognize like all the horror that going through these things felt like. And, it makes me really feel compassion for other people, because, we're all, especially with these diseases and trouble with diagnoses, and uneducated doctors and uneducated people, who make judgments and don't understand the whole picture. Right. So I've learned a lot about not judging others and having compassion for what you don't know, what someone else is going through. And a lot of times with the lupus stuff is, well, you don't look sick, is the whole thing. And it got to the point once where I tried to go off the prednisone because of what it did to me, and I couldn't even get I could barely get my clothes on or up the stairs. I had to walk with a cane. And I mean, I would have to, like, since I'm very flexible, I bend better at the hips than I do at the knees. So I would just like kind of drop my underwear on the floor and bend over and pull it up straight up, because I couldn't, do the knee things to get my clothes on. It was at the worst of the flare. I was sweating all the time, from just here up, just dripping, not just sweat, perspiring. I mean, sweating. Like football player in 100-degree heat sweat, from here up, and running fevers, and my body temperature, my natural body temperature was around 96.2 to 96.8, because it was about from the adrenaline, the shortage of adrenaline, natural adrenaline in my body, and that went on for like 2 years. I mean, just daily.
Yeah, because mine runs low like that also.
Mm-hmm.
And then so it's like when you have a 99-degree temperature, to me that's high grade, it's not low grade.
Yeah, it's 3 degrees higher than what you were.
And if you were at 98.6, that would be 101.6, and you'd be at the ER. Well, I would be based upon my protocol.
Mm-hmm.
So doctors don't understand that at the ERs.
No.
So what kind of treatments do you receive for your lupus?
Right now, I take methotrexate and Plaquenil.
Okay.
I also, got to take the folic acid for the methotrexate, because methotrexate depletes your B vitamins, particularly folic acid, and I'm on a bunch of other medications for, so to help me sleep, because the fibromyalgia so disturbs your sleep, and that I became extremely sleep deprived. And all these conditions, chronic pain, blah, 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 all create depression.
Right.
That's the symptom of it. So between the severe sleep deprivation, being depressed,
And anxiety.
And, yeah, because, you get to the point when you have pain that's between 7 and 9 on a regular basis, you become frightened of the pain, and it's so scary that you just, you never leave the house without, carrying, some kind of a painkiller with you in case it hits and you're in a public place, because you can't freak out in the middle of a public place.
Yeah, and then if you forget to take your pain medicines, then you freak out because you forgot to bring them with you, and it's like, what if?
Yeah.
And so it's a bad circle. What treatments have you done that haven't helped?
A lot of, I've done a lot of things. I did have a really good chiropractor that helped. I did acupuncture for about 1.5 years, and that helped short term, but it didn't do enough long term, sadly, because I think I just had too many issues going.
And see, I did acupuncture, and
But
it put me in the hospital.
Really?
Uh-huh. Anytime I've tried to do like Eastern medicine, or, not the traditional Western medicine, every single time I've ended up in the hospital.
Wow.
So, it just doesn't agree with my body. It just doesn't agree.
I think when I was in the worst of it, it just wasn't enough. And just the constant level of pain and stuff going on, it was sort of like a Band-Aid on a amputation. It really wasn't enough.
It's true.
But I mean, I do know that it does great things, and just like say, what is the thing, the antibiotic, penicillin. Penicillin, some people it cures, some people it kills. Each medication is not going to work. Like they put me on Lyrica. They tried all these kind of different pain medications, and Lyrica made my brain work like a car with water in the gasoline. It was like, I get stuck or lost in the middle of a sentence, and it was just so jerky, my head, so that was not a good thing either.
How has lupus affected your quality of life? How's it changed your life?
I used to, be a real adrenaline junkie. I was a scuba diver. Just had gotten my instructor's license, and I used to do some heavy duty diving with, go ice diving and diving on wrecks and all this kind of crazy stuff. And all those things, and I identified, that was like my identity of myself, that I could go camping anywhere, and
work.
And so that was how I identified me, and that was gone. And then it started affecting my work. I slowed down, and I did not realize it. And of course, nobody bothered to tell me until I found out from where the office knew, the entire office knew, but I didn't, and I didn't understand what was, why there were issues and problems. And so, I started, beginning to forget things, and just I was so exhausted that after, it destroyed my relationship, which, good thing you found out early, because you got fat and sick is like a horrible reason for somebody to break up with you. And it's not because I've had to do your dishes in the sink for the last 2 months, and I've been doing your laundry when our laundry was mixed together, and I paid for his daughter to come clean her house, and paid the utilities. So it wasn't like I was sponging by any means.
No.
And so that changed. My physical body changed so much that, you know, I look in the mirror and I was turned off. And so, you know, just felt, and plus the reactions of people who knew me, who hadn't seen me in a while, was just like,
Doesn't help.
you know, so I really retreated. I started to retreat, and I moved into this a little tiny apartment that was on this wetlands. It was like really far from work, and I just hung out with the wild animals and the cats. And I would be so exhausted from trying to do my job, and that when and I had this horrendously long commute, which I didn't mind the commute, but on my days off I'd end up sleeping through them. So my social life disappeared, and I used to be, very social and gregarious and knew everybody and was always doing something or meeting new people, but I didn't have the energy to do any of those things, even when I did have opportunities to go see friends and hang out, and then to have to explain to people why I couldn't do things anymore, and that that everything in my life had changed, and but then after I moved to New Orleans, people were like, "Oh, what are you doing?" I'm like, trying to get better, and I don't want to tell them my whole story. Like, oh, I have lupus and 5 herniated discs, and I'm in chronic pain, and I'm trying not to fall apart on a regular basis. And and the depression got so bad, which I could, at one point where like everything made me cry, and I'm not particularly a crier. I would rather do a jig naked in Times Square than cry. Even if I'm by myself, it gives me a headache, and it's just not my thing. I hate it. I just loathe it. And now I'm like Miss Waterworks, which is funny because the Sjogren's dries your eyes out. And I'm like, well, they're lubricated now.
Okay, we'll finish this up with one last question. What do you think the most important thing a person with lupus or chronic illness should know?
That their life is going to change, and that they have to somehow find peace with the new person that they're becoming, and find things that'll still give them pleasure. Right. I know that's been hard for me because, my whole thing was like, oh, I'm an adrenaline junkie and like running, jumping, climbing, and all this other thing. And, that people around you won't know how to deal with it, and that you're going to have to, some relationships in your life are going to change, even with people you really care about. And that's going to be really hard, but that they should find not necessarily particularly a support group, but other people with lupus or with a chronic disease or with chronic pain, that they can have at least 1 or 2 people that they can call and talk to who understands their point of view.
Right.
And because I would never have understood this had I not been through it.
Mm-mm. You definitely have to walk in the same shoes.
Right. But I would say, finding something that still gives you pleasure. And, I hermited myself for 4.5 years. And, and in the long run, it really nipped me in the bud. Mm-hmm. Definitely, I would suggest therapy, being able to have someone to talk to who's not emotionally involved. I'm a big believer in therapy, because sometimes you just cannot solve these problems for yourself, especially when your brain is just gotten squirrely on you, and you can't even figure out your own thoughts sometimes. Meditation, if you can do it, is extremely important. I found that it just helped to just take a little bit off, and it was really difficult when I started having just so much chaotic running thoughts. But find that quiet time where you can bring yourself back and find peace in yourself. Find, something you still enjoy doing. Find the people who you can still relate to and who are willing to make an effort to understand what you're going through. And I guess therapy would be my best bet. Would be my strong suggestions, so that you do have somebody to talk to, and talk to about the fact that there are people that you love and care about who don't understand where you are and can't, unless they go through it. Some people just don't have that kind of attempts of empathy or understanding. And just to try to not blame yourself either, because sometimes you ask, like, what did I do to deserve this? And it's not anything you've done to deserve it. You don't deserve it. It's happened to you. And as my grandmother say, it's not what happens to you, it's the way you deal with it.
Right.
And that's been a huge lesson for me, and I'm having, and it's been, and I'm still really learning it.
I think we all learn, because every day, as we know, it's something different, something new. But thank you, Sarah, for spending this time with us and sharing your story. So I hope you all can take in, her story and learn from it, and it helps you. So we'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.
Bye.